Hi, I'm Cindy Cloud with Riley Blake Designs, and today's tutorial is how to create a quick and easy pillowcase. They're so much fun to make because you can customize them with the fabrics that you choose. So whether you're making it for a special occasion, a holiday, or you just want to match a quilt top, it adds that extra special touch to a bed. So let's talk about the fabric. That is the fun part, choosing the fabric. First question is, are you choosing a non-directional fabric print, or is it directional? You can definitely see a direction. This is facing that direction. This you can't quite tell which direction, so this is considered a non-directional fabric. So non-directional, you need a yard if you're making a simple pillowcase. And what do I mean by a simple pillowcase? Is I'm using the same print on each side. So if and then the flange, or my coordinating fabric, my accent fabric here, I'm only using 2 fabrics, so I need a yard of fabric for that. But if you want to add a little more flair and add another coordinating fabric on the end, that looks really nice. You only need 3/4 of a yard of the main print, 1.5 inches of this accent piece, and then you're going to need 9 inches of the coordinating on the edge of your pillowcase. And that is for a non-directional fabric. Now, regardless if you want to make a simple pillowcase or one with a little more flair, you're going to need 1.25 yards of directional fabric. So let's cut out our fabrics and let's make our 2 pillowcases, because the technique is slightly different for a directional piece of fabric. And I love auditioning fabric. Isn't that fun? This is how I can tell if I want these fabrics together, as I kind of audition fabrics together. So I have already cut out my 9 inches, my 1.5 inches. I'm going to put this to the side. I'm going to put this to the side. I've already cut out my 1.5 inches. Oh, and I do have one more fabric to show. I just wanted to show you, if you wanted to use a border print, it's the same, and it's going parallel to the selvage, not perpendicular to the selvage, then you're fine to cut out 1 yard or 3/4 of a yard. So that's for border print fabric. Lots of fabrics to choose from, right? So I've already cut out this fabric to be 1 yard. Again, I'm just going to show you quickly how I do this. So I have 1 yard of fabric. I am going to do this pillowcase with a little more flair. So I only need the 27 inches. But if I was making that simple pillowcase, this is ready to go for the outside edge. Now it's just extra that I'm going to put to the side. So that is ready to go. And then I've got my 9 inches and my 1.5 inches. Those are ready to go. I'm going to put those to the side. Now, when you've got the directional piece of fabric, again, I've got this directional pillowcase right here. If you don't get 1.25 yards fabric, then all your animals would be facing sideways, and we want them to go this direction. That's why we need 1.25 yards. You just need more fabric when it's directional, just the way it is. Okay, so I need a full 1.5 yards. And it's going all the way over, or 1.25 yards. Excuse me, I think I said 1.5 yards, but I need 1.25 yards. And you need a big area to work on. So I'm going to put this over. It's running into my machine. I'm going to mark that right there as I lay this out. Okay, let's give it a cut. My extra fabric. Okay, what's the next step here is you're going to open it up like this and flip it the other direction. Go right sides together. And so one side of your pillowcase is going to be facing the right way, but if you flip it to the other side, you know, it'll be going upside down, but that's okay because the pillowcase only shows on one side, right? Okay. Just smooth out your fabrics. In fact, I'm going to give it a quick press. Make sure I don't have any bulges anywhere I don't want. Okay, before I give it a cut. I am going to trim off that selvage. Normally you don't have to, but when I open up these seams, I usually flip that. I usually trim that off and once I flip it over. Okay, I'm lining that up. I'll move that out of the way so I don't cut that. And I am cutting my 27 inches. Now, if I was going to do a coordinating fabric with this on the outside edge, this would all be waste. And since I want to use more of the fabric, I'm going to make one of the simple pillowcases. And I have a lot, so I could add 10 more inches instead of the 9 inches. And I think I'll do that. I think I'll just add a little bit more. But if you're doing a coordinating fabric, I would probably just do the 9 inches, but we will just add a little bit more since we've got it right here. Now this is your extra fabric. So for both of these pillowcases, you are going to need to, this just lays out. I'm going to put that to the side. You're going to need to press your trim piece or your flange piece in half. So you go wrong sides together. Sometimes I give it a little spritz so it's a little easier to work with. It's kind of like making binding. I'm going to flip that over. Get your clapper, go along. You've got your trim piece pressed. I've already pressed the other trim piece. I'm going to put this to the side for now. And let's assemble our first pillowcase. Okay, the first thing you need to do is put the fabric facing up. The right side's up, the pretty side of the fabric is up. And then I lay the main body of the fabric like this. Now, this has been called the Burrito method. Oh, I've also heard it called the magic pillowcase. Lots of different ways because it's kind of a tried and true way to make a pillowcase. But the change I like to do is just make it simple. So I usually don't use coordinating fabrics. I just make a simple, get a yard of fabric if it's non-directional, or a yard and a fourth, and just make simple pillowcases. I find that quite easy. Now these clips are excellent in holding things in place, because I'm going to show you what you do next. And then after I roll it in place, then I use pins. But for the first part, I kind of just roll that, or I put those in place. Now you're going to get the main body of your pillowcase, and you're going to roll it up like this. So you can see your trim piece, your outside piece, and you're going to flip it up like that. Now I grab my pins, and again, I haven't trimmed my selvages off. I've got stuff on the outside, so that's A-okay. And I'm going to pin these now, taking out my clips as I go and making sure that flange piece is right at the edge, and we're going right sides together. Oh, clip there. You can use these clips, but I kind of like the stability of these pins when I'm sewing all these layers together. Okay, I'm gonna put this aside, and that's gonna be ready to be sewn. Now, let me just put this together. It's the exact same way as I did the other one. I'll lay this out. But the only difference is this is directional. So make sure both your pieces are going the correct direction. So don't flip them. So look at this. The houses are going, facing that up. So I'm putting them, making sure they're going the right direction on both pieces. That's what you need to be super mindful of. Now let's line that up. Okay, that's all lined up. Let's add our trim piece on top. Okay, we're going to roll that forward. Yep, making sure that's going the right direction. Flipping it over. Then I add my pins. All right, now I'm going to take both of these pillowcases and take it to the machine and sew right down on the side using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, let's bring them back. And we'll pull the insides out. Sometimes this is called birthing your project, but it's just pulling the insides out. And actually this one that I did 10 inches is a little easier to get my fingers in. So it's nice to have that little extra. Now look how great this looks. That's the first part. It's pretty cool, isn't it, to have it come out? Now we're going to give that a press. But let's first birth this project too, right? Pull it right side out. Let's pull it. And you've done one seam, and the back side of it is, there's no seam exposed doing this method. So take a look. See that? You can't see any seam. Here's a loose thread. I'll just cut that. Which is so cool because your pillows are open on one end and you don't want to see any ugly seams, right? So let's give these both a press. Again, this is a good time to use the steaming option on your iron. And a lot of times I'll press on this side. Okay, so I've got this steaming option, so I give it a little spritz. And when I press, I'm kind of lifting it up and making sure that our flange lies flat. That's why I like to use 1.5 inches, because if you use a bigger size, you know, some people say use 2 inches. I think the 1.5 inches is just perfect to just kind of peek through that area. Just kind of giving a look. Oh, and I need my clapper too. There it is. Okay. That is ready to go. Oh, flip it over, trim any threads. See, being careful not to cut your fabric. That's looking good. Now, this is the time that I trim my sides. If you didn't trim them before, it's time to trim those selvages. Just make sure I line them up on the top so I'm cutting straight. Move it along. Okay. So if you want to quickly finish your pillowcase, you just have 2 more seams. The key is to line up this accent piece, your flange piece. You are going to have a little bulk there. So get your pins. That's where I pin first. On each side of that flange so it doesn't move at all. Okay, then we're going to pin all the way along here and down here. Now, if I'm finishing it this method, you can serge it, and I recommend you serging it. It gives a really nice edge. If you don't have a serger, I usually take a bigger seam and then just slightly bigger, and then I zigzag the edges. So I'm just gonna do a quick stitch around these two sides, but if you just want raw edges, that's okay too. Okay, again, I would serge the edges, zigzag, but for this video, I'm just gonna leave these raw edges so you can see what it looks like when I flip it inside out. And I would give this body a good press, and that pillowcase is ready to go. Now, the way I always finish all my pillowcases, because again, one side is always open, so you can look in the inside of your pillowcase, is I do what's called French seams. Now a French seam, I'm gonna grab one of my pillows over here. Let's grab this one in the middle. Okay, let me just show you a finished French seam. You can see how it, no seams at all. It just looks so nice and tidy. I love the look of it. So how you do that is, instead of right sides together, you do wrong sides together. It's gonna feel crazy to do it this way, but I'll show you how it's done. You're gonna line up those just like you did when you did right sides together. And you are gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance around the entire pillowcase, right side out. And if you've never done a French seam before, you're gonna think that sounds a little crazy. But stay with me, because it's easier than you think. Okay, let's pin this bottom. All right, let's take it to the machine and sew. Okay, you bring it back here, and you're gonna trim your seam down to 1/8 of an inch. So just taking a little of that extra fabric down to 1/8 of an inch from your seam. You don't want to cut, and it's a little bulky right here, so kind of just ease over that. Oh, I'm gonna have to do that again. Just ever so gently, taking a look at that. Trimming down to 1/8 inch from your seam. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, that looks good. Now you are going to flip this inside out, and you're going to do 2 more seams. And when you're flipping inside out, make sure check all your seams that you didn't cut too close to the edge and you've created a hole. Get this little stiletto, poke out my corners. There you go. Don't want to poke through, just poking out. There you go. And I do run along here, pressing out that seam. Now it's important to press at this point so your seam is poked out. You roll it a little bit. That's looking good. I use this stiletto to really, I go right on one side of that seam and really push out. And then right after I do that, I give it a quick press and take it all along the edge. Because if you haven't guessed what I'm doing, I'm creating this little, making it nice and flat, and we're gonna sew a 1/4 inch all the way around all these two sides. And that is the final touch in a French seam. So I'm hiding that seam I made. Oh, wrong side. Now, why I'm pressing this? You know, one side is going to be upside down on this, and if that really bothered you, you could cut this fabric in half and sew it back together. So, like the houses, whatever is directional on both sides of the pillowcase is going the right direction. But you only see one side of the pillowcase, so it's much easier to just roll it and not make an extra cut in your fabric. Hopefully that makes sense. If it really bothers you, cut it, re-sew it, and it's good to go. Okay, that's a little extra pressing and a little extra step, but I think you're really gonna love the results. Now it's ready to take to the machine, and I'm gonna sew a 1/4 inch on both sides, doing a good back stitch on each side where I start and stop. And that's our last two sides we need to stitch. So let's take it to the machine and sew. Okay, now it's time to turn it right side out. You do not want to clip your corners. I flip that inside out, pull it out. Pop that out. Now is a really good time to give your pillowcase a nice press. And your pillowcase is finished. I just love the look of a French seam. It's a nice finishing touch. And that is how to make a quick and easy pillowcase.